Steve Dickson was, of course, a member of the LNP government under Campbell Newman. He left the LNP. He became the leader of One Nation in Queensland. He was working in Pauline Hanson's office and he was standing to be senator at the upcoming election. Now, I said this at the time, that the fit-up job that was done on One Nation by Al Jazeera was a disgrace. But even more of a disgrace was the fact that the footage that was all owned by Al Jazeera, in the possession of Al Jazeera, magically somehow was able to leap out of the servers in the Middle East and make it to a current affair. This is the strip joint stuff. Now, I'm not justifying the strip joint stuff, but the timing about just how calculated the hit job was is in part what matters here, because they deliberately waited until after it was impossible to replace Steve Dickson on the ballot paper. That was part of the hit. But Steve Dickson and his wife have appeared on a YouTube channel to try to explain what the impact is like when you are in the middle of one of these national events where everyone is pointing at you, and it's worth a look.
I had to watch Steve 24/7, and I'm just being honest. Steve would virtually lay on the bed in the fetal position. I would follow him to the bathroom, to the shower. Had I have not been here, especially during the time when the media were camped outside the front of the property, anything could have happened.
I felt destroyed. I felt like I'd had my life taken away from me. I couldn't sleep. I had to go to my doctor to get medication to be able to sleep, because every time I closed my eyes, I felt like I was in a nightmare. And I thought, well, if this can happen to me, it's going to happen to somebody else again in the future. And it's so easy for a foreign power, it's so easy for money and the media to be able to absolutely destroy somebody. And I think it's just bloody woeful. And I tell you what, I think it almost drove me to the point of suicide.
Yeah.
So we heard from Steve Dickson, a figure who wanted to get into the Senate based on for One Nation. But Senator Patterson, I wanted to ask you about this here, where I'm just always interested, regardless of whether people did the really wrong thing, perceived to do the wrong thing, fitted up doing the wrong thing, completely innocent, right? Take your pick on where you think either this case or others sit. Yep. But I thought that you could see by his body language, his physicality and what he was talking about the immense toll that happens when, for whatever reason, for 48 hours, everyone's pointing at you. And it is amazing about how few times the media goes back to have a look at the roadkill along the way.
Paul, I'm not a typical One Nation defender. I think they're very good at raising grievances and pretty poor at proposing solutions, but I have to say I'm pretty sympathetic to Steve Dickson here. He was held to an impossibly high moral standard that, frankly, I think a lot of people in the political class would struggle to meet. And if the public has an expectation, and if the media intends to prosecute, that in politics all human beings will be perfect human beings with unimpeachable personal lives, then I think we're in for a very rough time indeed. When you're at the middle of a media spotlight like that, as Steve was, it's a pretty awful thing. And as you say, the caravan moves on very quickly and leaves a bit of wreckage behind.
Well, and also the difficulty with either cancel culture or outrage culture, or even just, national spotlight that is negative jihad, is it's very hard to build a life after that. Now, capable people who didn't commit crimes, right? We're just talking about just judgment calls of pub tests and all of that other stuff that gets said, right? So I'm not at all going to be finding excuses for, people who've been in and out of prison or in and out of courtrooms. But it is incredibly difficult. What do you go on and do? Oh, well, you become an auctioneer and then some smart aleck takes a photo and that's in the paper a few months later. If public life has ended, life hasn't ended, but you can understand how people feel that the walls have closed in completely on them.
Yeah, I mean, and you saw that really clearly with the video as well. Not only does it impact him, it impacts his wife. I thought the real telling line was that she had to keep an eye on him 24 hours a day. And I think, as James said, the caravan moves on, and part of the culture that we've got as well is the pile on and absolutely blowtorch and then just move on to the next thing. Now, I mean, what he did is he's paid a very heavy consequence for it. This is a bloke who, all things being equal, was going to be a senator within a couple of weeks. And you know, the mental health thing, I think we don't talk often enough about. You know, everyone gets their line, everyone wants to take that snappy shot, someone wants to take a photo of him taking out the garbage afterwards to show that he's a broken person. He's a broken person. And no matter what job he's going to take now, there is going to be a follow-up article, 5 years, 10 years' time says, this is the man that could have been. Now, he's admitted to the mistake he's made. He's paid a heavy consequence of it. But we've also, you know, I want to say we, like the whole of society, needs to take some sort of responsibility that it's not in anyone's interests to then not only, you know, they've done the hit job, but then after that, they've absolutely buried him into the ground. Who's going to be the person, if that person, you know, if he, for example, did hurt himself or you know, God forbid, went the next step and suicided, who's going to step up and say, well, hang on a second, we need to have a look at this. We need to be incredibly careful because that spotlight and that intense pressure, it's happened to him, but it happens a lot to politicians who find themselves in trouble. You know, they for whatever it is that they do, the blowtorch hits and then they walk away, but the carnage that's left behind is their family, their associates, their friends. It doesn't just damage that person.
But also it's this thing too, James, where I think it's also sort of worth noting, and look, I wish Steve and his wife nothing but the best. He was always very kind to me when he was involved in politics, and I know that this is a very important thing for him to be able to start to tell his story, and I'll make sure that you can see the video, go and have a look. But I just don't think, and look, I know that during an election campaign there's a lot of noise and a lot of other things to pay attention to, but to me it was, I mean, I find it gross that the media union gave Al Jazeera scoop of the year for the hit job on One Nation. But secondly, the fact that there were so few curious people in the media who asked the question of, hang on, how did the footage get from Al Jazeera, who could have put it in the doco but didn't, but then sent it to A Current Affair magically, who either stole it or it was given to them. There's only one of two options there, and then decided to release it after the close of nominations, therefore maximum damage. That's the stuff that, again, if somebody had tried, if let's say an alt-right group had tried to do that to the Greens, we'd still be talking about it.
I completely understand why people are cynical about this, Paul. It's a situation of, oh, whoops, and it finds its way where it needs to and gets out and does the damage that it was intended to. I think the whole thing is pretty unseemly, particularly the hidden camera aspect of it. I doubt that there are many people in public life, whether they're in the media or in politics, who would come up all that well if they had a camera secretly trained on them for a number of days, and certainly if it involved them hitting the source pretty hard at the same time. I think probably a lot of people would behave in a way that they wouldn't be proud of, that might be offensive when viewed on primetime television, and that might ruin their reputations forever. And that they'll really just struggle to recover from. So I'm not sure we should be encouraging that kind of journalism, frankly.
No, I agree, let alone calling it scoop of the year. Come on.
We need to worry about it. As I said before, there's got to be a certain responsibility. You know, I mean, this was, whether you say, look, it's convenient, it's accidental, certainly One Nation has made their own bid.
Sure.
At different time. But the fact of the matter is we've got a person here, and it could happen to anybody.
Correct.
Who is at a point where they were considering suicide.
Correct.
So we've got to also understand that we could put so much pressure on somebody that we actually destroy their life. And if that's the sort of game that's to be played, people don't want to play that game, because there's no use doing the damage and then walking away saying, oh, I didn't realise that was going to happen. That's exactly what could have happened.
Correct.